All right, Coach, Carson Wentz has yet to be cleared for contact. How likely is it that he will be there to start Week 1 for the Eagles?
I don't think he's going to start Week 1. I don't see the need for him to start Week 1. It amazes me that during the offseason we talked about whether or not they could trade Nick Foles, and the feelings like, oh, how could you possibly trade the Super Bowl MVP? He's so good. He gives them such depth. And now the guy has 1 or 2 bad preseason games, and we're worried about whether Carson Wentz can start Week 1. So Nick Foles can carry him to the playoffs, can be the Super Bowl MVP, but can't give Carson Wentz 2 or 3 weeks to get right if he's got an injury? Like, why are we even talking about this? Foles should be the starter, and he should play early until Wentz is ready. And when Wentz is ready, he's ready.
Well, let me ask you, though. Just last segment, you said, and we were actually talking off the air about how you don't get to pick up where you left off, that every year is new. And so, like, that's the same for the players, too, right? And so, like, Nick Foles, what we have seen post-Super Bowl, it's very small, has been awful. And it would be concerning if you're the Eagles and you know you're probably not the Super Bowl champs if instead of being 13-3, you're 12-4, and the season doesn't go through the link. Like, that would be my rebuttal to that.
How many plays has he played in the preseason versus how many plays does this coaching staff watch them over the course of training camp? So he has that small amount of plays. Do we really understand what mistakes were made on the offensive line, what mistakes were made with the wide receivers, what mistakes were made with the backs? We don't have a context for his overall play. Should it be better? Do you want it to be better? Yes. Do they collectively want to be better than getting shut out by the Browns? Yes, they do, but that's not where they are. That doesn't mean that player has fundamentally changed his ability to be successful in this system.
Let's not forget, what was your opinion of Nick Foles before, on that Friday of the NFC Championship game? Nick and I were at that game. What was your opinion of Nick Foles on that day? Now, you got 2 other games to add to his resume, that being NFC Championship game where he was outstanding, and then the Super Bowl where Tom Brady was brilliant. Nick Foles was amazing. So we have to add that into what we already thought. And to me, the thing I've said about Nick, the reason why he is a backup is because he's inconsistent. I wouldn't be alarmed if a starting quarterback in the league, unless it was someone like Blake Bortles, who hadn't had a whole bunch of success, if they struggled in the preseason, I would take up what my opinion was based on them being inconsistent and seeing the inconsistent, expect that. Now, as far as Nick Foles, what's the problem? Is he's quarterback in the Super Bowl team. That's the biggest problem. I haven't changed my opinion, but I do believe in the coaching staff. The same way they came up with a competent game plan to throw the ball against Minnesota, which I didn't think they were capable of doing, throw the ball against New England on that level, I didn't think they're capable of doing. They can do that for 2 or 3 weeks, Coach. I'm with you to be able to get through the regular season.
And here's the other thing that I've said before is things have changed for the Philadelphia Eagles. This is a Super Bowl game for the Browns at this point in the season to play the Eagles because they can measure themselves against the Super Bowl champs. So they're all giving their best shot. When they come in and they win, they're talking about, look, we went 0-16, they won the Super Bowl, look how far we've come. It's a measuring stick where Philadelphia's like, okay, this is a preseason game, we're going to go out, we're going to play. So it's a totally different approach by those teams.
I know something that Coach was concerned about, and we talked about it all offseason, and we didn't know how it would manifest itself in the regular season, but New England, there was a lot of conversation about New England, how much more fun we have than them. The one thing Coach will say, them guys in New England, they know how to be champs too. So you have to learn every aspect of football, and we can't think that all of a sudden they've won their first world championship and the organization and players are going to know how to react as world champions, and that's something we do not give New England credit for. After the huge comeback win against the Atlanta Falcons, how did they bounce back? They bounced back with Tom Brady having one of the best seasons ever.
And doesn't that fall on Doug Peterson? Doesn't that fall on Doug Peterson to make sure this team controls what they say, controls where their expectations are, controls where their egos are at coming into the season? Isn't that all on Peterson?
But Jenna, Doug Peterson is learning too. And the first time that we won the Super Bowl with Bill Belichick, we got knocked out of the playoffs the next year. We went 9-7. We started great, and then we had this huge drop-off, and then we kind of finished with a little bit of a surge, but we got knocked out because you do the things that you did the previous year, and you go through that process, but it's different.
Isn't it surprising, Coach, when you try to do the same thing, and even if you could measure it, it still wouldn't be enough because the expectations have changed and what you're getting every week from the opposition changes. If Philadelphia loses next Thursday night, in 2 Thursdays, okay, if they lose that game to Atlanta, what a big deal is going to be compared to if they had lost last year.
The first game. Of course. But here's the Zach Berman, who's a writer for the Philadelphia Inquirer, wrote a great article on this last week after Nick Foles' bad game this past, I think it was Thursday night, and said, and he's not your typical backup quarterback in this regard. Obviously, he's a Super Bowl MVP. Throw that out. Usually, a guy's a backup because their best isn't great. You know what I mean? They are consistently mediocre. He laid out that in Nick Foles, because he's started a lot in his career, it's a whole bunch of outlier games up the top and the bottom. Not a lot of middle-of-the-road games. Like a handful of, like the 7-touchdown game and things similar to that, the Super Bowl. And then a handful of what we're seeing in this preseason, which is, oh, my God, this guy, it's the types of games that almost led him to leaving football. I would argue that for the Eagles, that potentially, if you're trying to win a Super Bowl, then, okay, you'll roll the dice with it because you're going to have great quarterback performance. But for a couple weeks to start a regular season, when you have that great of an offensive line, that great of a defensive line, that much talent around you, what you would take a McCown brother backup who's just going to be a caretaker. You would take something like that. Now, they needed the great game in the NFC Championship game, and they really needed it in the Super Bowl. I don't know if that's what you need because you look at the beginning of their schedule. Yeah, Atlanta's tough, but then it's Tampa with no Jameis, Indy at home. Like, those are the first.
So that right there would lead to what Coach is saying. You should start the season, especially the first 2 weeks, with Nick Foles.
And you look at Nick Foles' career, it's been pretty consistent in terms of the ups and downs. He got traded to St. Louis, didn't go very well. Then he was in Kansas City with Andy, who drafted him. That didn't go very well. And then he ended up in Philadelphia. And even when we were talking about the playoffs, I was thinking you need to go get a different quarterback than Nick Foles. I believe that because he had been so up and down. So then he hits during the playoffs. But his record has been, or his track record has been, up and down, up and down. But all offseason we couldn't trade him because he was a Super Bowl MVP. What if he started so fast that it would be hard to put Carson Wentz in? That person has not changed. So if you believed in him then, you should believe in him now and give Carson a chance to get as healthy as possible.
Nick Foles, consistently inconsistent. Thanks for watching. Subscribe here to get the latest from the show. Also, be sure to check out more of the best clips from First Things First, or go watch a few segments from our other shows on FS1.